Good morning, everybody. I hope you've all had your coffee. We are going to get started in just a moment as soon as we're all settled in. Thanks.
As a whole, considers the books that have won the greatest. Oh my God, this is good. Over the past 3 decades, the picture book illustrators and authors have taken much more experimental and yes, I agree. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. I've been dying to do that. Oh, sorry. I am reading the most fabulous book. I mean, this is pure gold, brown gold. Yes. This is amazing. Now, I'm not so familiar with this person. Michelle H. Martin. Is there anyone in this room who knows Michelle H. Martin? Oh.
Dr. Michelle H. Martin is the Beverly Cleary Endowed Professor for Children and Youth Services in the Information School at the University of Washington, where she teaches graduate courses in children and young adult literature and youth services. Michelle's a renowned author, essayist, lecturer, book critic, community literacy activist, and champion of diversity in children's literature. But what you don't know about Michelle is that she loves to travel, and she's already led 2 study abroad programs, one to the UK and one to Australia and New Zealand, and I'm interested to see where she goes next.
Thanks. Wow, so she likes to travel. Wow, that's so interesting. I'm learning so much. Is there anyone else who knows Michelle H. Martin? All right then. Here we go. Here we go.
She has published widely, including, of course, Brown Gold, Milestones of African American Children's Picture Books, 1845 to 2002, and the co-edited Sexual Pedagogies, Sex Education in Britain, Australia, and America, 1879 to 2000. But what you don't know about Michelle Martin is that of all the people in this room, if you were stuck on a desert island, there's exactly one person who would help you survive. And that is Michelle Martin. Because she did that as a Girl Scout. She was on an island for a week, and they supported themselves and found food. And so you know that she is a hardcore scholar. But you did not know just how hardcore Michelle Martin is. And now you do.
All right. Thank you, stranger. Wow, so I should put her down, make contact in case I'm, stranded. Okay, I feel like I need to know more though. Is there anyone else who knows Michelle H. Martin? Oh, okay.
So I know Dr. Michelle H. Martin as a scholar, and in addition to her teaching and writing, she is the founder and co-director of Camp Read-a-Rama, a day camp for children ages 4 to 11 that uses children's books as the springboard for all other camp activities. She also sings there. I've witnessed it. But what you don't know about Dr. Michelle H. Martin is that she makes delicious homemade chai. And I know because when my mom was worried about me staying in an Airbnb at my first conference in South Carolina, Dr. Martin, over my head, offered to let me stay with her, and my mother agreed. And so the first night, a very restful sleep, after I woke up the next morning, there was homemade chai for me and Dr. Martin to share.
Wow. Okay, so scholarly chops, desert island, and food. She's perfect. But I am wondering a bit about her academic preparation. I'm just curious about, does anyone speak to that? Oh!
Hi, I'm Roberta Trites. It's Kate, right? Kate Capshaw? Nice to meet you. Oh, thank you. It's been a lovely welcoming conference. Michelle H. Martin earned her undergraduate degree from the College of William and Mary in Virginia. She earned her MS in outdoor teacher education, which is where she learned how to keep Phil alive on an island, at Northern Illinois University. And of course, she earned her PhD at Illinois State University, where I might or might not have been her advisor. Second PhD student I graduated, first was Mike Cadden. But what you don't know about Michelle is that she's really good with snakes. She had one or two pet snakes when she was working on her doctorate, and I'm terrified of snakes. I was gardening one day and I called her to get the garter snake out of my yard. And she said no, because by the time I get there, it'll be gone. And it's like, oh, so am I will have to move. She's a lifelong Girl Scout, an incredible cook, not only homemade chai, but sweet potato pie, oh my God, to die for. And yes, one of the best singers I know.
Comes the formal part. We all know that Michelle Martin is a scholarly rock star. Her recent publications, in addition to Brown Gold and all of her other work that we've heard about, include Augusta Baker and the Art of Storytelling, Gateway to Children's Literacy and Literature, Facing the Black Child, The Bold Direction of 21st Century Picture Books, and my favorite recent work, Brown Girl Dreaming of a New ChLA. She has also published several important articles on literacy, education, and environmentalism, co-authored with Kathleen Campana and Liz Mills, a testament to her commitment to mentorship and collaboration. And in terms of the ChLA, Michelle's commitment of time, energy, experience, and insight has been nothing less than extraordinary. The first African-American president of our association, yes. Michelle has worked assiduously to promote inclusiveness across our community. She was a founding member of the Diversity Committee, a turning point in our field, and worked on that committee for many years. Her longtime efforts culminated in the organization with her colleagues at the University of South Carolina of the 2014 annual conference themed Diverging Diversities, Plurality in Children's and Young Adult Literature, Then and Now. Those of you who were there will remember it. The conference was a landmark for our field. Michelle's mentoring accomplishments are unparalleled, and she received the ChLA's Mentorship Award in 2018. But you may not know that her mentorship, see, I wanted to get in on the you may not know, that her mentorship has an international reach. In June 2012, Michelle was one of several US scholars invited to participate in the first China-US symposium held at Ocean University in Qingdao. I was also in attendance and was able to witness Michelle's impressive abilities to connect and support scholars across linguistic and cultural borders. She built strong professional relationships on that visit and decided to host a second China-US symposium, which brought 18 Chinese scholars to the United States. No outside influence propelled this creative and organizational effort. Michelle's own big-hearted support of scholarship in the field spearheaded that symposium. Many of us in the room could speak of the way that Michelle's generous presence has transformed our lives. I consider my 20-year friendship with Michelle to be one of the most valuable relationships in my life. I look back, oh my God, I'm gonna tear up, here we go, and think of us fresh out of grad school and bonding over our mutual love of the work of Arna Bonton, early career hatching plans to rock this organization, and we did, Michelle. As mothers, bringing our young daughters on that visit to China and having her fabulous husband Glenn take them around the city while we did the academic stuff, collaborating over and over again on conference panels and publications, even now on a special issue of the Brownies book, meeting up at Yale and Worcester for conversation, brainstorming, and salvific camaraderie. I hope we have at least 20 more years together in this field, and I'm just one person whose life has been touched by Michelle Martin. And I want to close with a few words of Michelle's words from Brown Gold. She wrote them in 2004. It is my hope that this discussion of some of the historical, professional, and analytical aspects of African American children's picture books will help to open up a more active, critical dialogue about the genre. Just as these books have become more inclusive in terms of audience and authorship, I hope that the walls that segregate the different disciplines that study Black children's literature continue to crumble and that the analytical discussions of these texts become more widespread than they have been in the past. Michelle, you have broken down these walls between the disciplines. You have changed people's lives. I know we can all agree that Michelle brings out the best in everyone who is lucky enough to know her. She has brought out the best in our field, and we are lucky to have her as a leader in our community. Michelle Martin.
Thank you for that amazing intro, all the people who were accomplice to that. So I'd like to dedicate this talk to June Cummins, my friend for 24 years, my children's literature colleague for all of that, and my conference wife for at least half of that. As most of you know, June died of ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, on February 22nd, 2018. I attended her memorial service in May at San Diego State at Joseph Thomas's invitation, and both what I knew of June already and what I learned of her from her family, friends, and colleagues reminded me of just how impactful one life can be, and therefore how important it is to make every day count. June managed to finish the writing of her Sidney Taylor book, a long time labor of love, with eye track on her computer after losing the use of everything but her eyes. So whatever my excuses are for not having finished my Langston Hughes Arna Bontemps book by now are no excuses at all. It's time to get that done. June's book, From Sarah to Sydney, the woman behind All of a Kind Family, will be out in the fall of 2020 with Yale University Press. I want to begin with a story. Once there was a little girl named Lillian, and Lillian lived in about the 1940 or so, and she really wanted a black doll baby for Christmas. Now, black doll babies were not that easy to come by, especially if you didn't want a Mammy doll or a Pickaninny or a Topsy-type doll, if you wanted the same type of big, beautiful doll that came in the white variety. And so Lillian asked her mother for a baby doll for Christmas. And Mother said, "Oh, that may be a challenge, but I'll see what I can do." So she was washing dishes one day in the kitchen, and all of a sudden she heard this little ditty coming out of Lillian's room. She was singing a song. I want a brown baby, tweedle-deedle-dee. I want a brown baby that looks like me. I want a brown baby, yes I do. I want a brown baby, I'll name her Sue. Well, Mother thought, wow, she's made up a song about this. I think I better try pretty hard to get a doll. And so she went down to Taps. And Taps has this big sign on the front called Meet Me at Taps, because lots of people like to meet there for lunch. And she went to the children's section, and she looked, and she found hula hoops. You remember hula hoops? She found rick-racks, those paddle ball things with the rubber band on the end. She found jacks, but she did not find any brown baby dolls. And so she went to the front counter, and she asked the attendant there, she said, "Excuse me, but do you have any brown baby dolls?" "We have got no brown baby dolls in this store." So Mother thought, okay, I have a few other ideas. So she went out and went home, and she was doing some things in the house, and she heard Lillian singing her song again. I want a brown baby, tweedle-deedle-dee. I want a brown baby that looks like me. I want a brown baby, yes I do. I want a brown baby, I'll name her Sue. Ooh, Mother thought, okay, I'll try the 5 and dime, because the 5 and dime has just about everything. So she went into the 5 and dime, and she went to the children's section, and she found pop guns, and she found Raggedy Ann and Andy, and she found teddy bears, and she found lots of white baby dolls, but she didn't find any brown baby dolls. So she went up to the front counter once again, and there was a gentleman there, and she said, "Excuse me, sir, but I'm looking for a brown baby doll for my daughter for Christmas. Do you have any brown baby dolls?" "We don't carry that kind of thing in this store." And so she thought, okay. But she had one more idea. So she went on home, and there was Lillian singing her song. You can help me. I want a brown baby, tweedle-deedle-dee. I want a brown baby that looks like me. I want a brown baby, yes I do. I want a brown baby, I'll name her Sue. So this time, Mother went down to S.H. Kress. Now, if you went to the conference in South Carolina, the SH Crest is right across the street from the Marriott. The store's not there anymore, but the sign is still there. So she went into the SH Crest because they had lots of stuff, tons of toys, and this time it was so close to Christmas that it was the day before Christmas, and she went early because she knew the stores were closing early. So she went in, and she went to the section where the children's things were, and she found hula hoops, and she found Rick-Racks, and she found Raggedy Ann and Andy, and she found lots and lots of white baby dolls, but she found no brown babies. So once again, she went up and asked, "Excuse me, but do you have any brown baby dolls? My daughter we've been looking for a brown baby doll for her for so long, and we wanted to get one for Christmas." He says, "We don't have any brown baby dolls in this store." So Mother went out. She went back in because she had an idea. So the next morning was Christmas. So Lillian got up, she woke her brother Ishmael up, and they went to the Christmas tree, but then they thought, we better go wake up our parents, because the Christmas before, they had opened all their presents. Parents had no idea who came from, what came from who, and so they got into a little trouble for that. So they woke up Mother and their father, and they went into the Christmas tree, and Mother handed Lillian a small package and Ishmael a small package. And Lillian opened hers, and she had peppermint sticks. And peppermint sticks are an everyday affair now, but that was a special thing at the time. You just didn't get candy very often. And so she split them and shared them with Ishmael. And then Ishmael unwrapped his, and he had a couple of oranges. And that was exciting, too, because they really didn't have oranges that often. So he shared his as well. And there was a big package under the tree. And so Mother came and put it in Lillian's hands, and she was so excited because she thought, maybe I finally have my brown baby. It was a big box. Smelled a little funny, but it was a big box. So she lifted off the lid. Oh, she was so excited because she finally had her brown baby. She picked up that brown baby, and she hugged it to herself, and oh, she was so excited. She pulled it back. She gasped because it was a brown baby, but it had a little pink here, and a little pink here, and a little pink here. And she looked at her nightgown, and it had a little brown here, and a little brown here, and a little brown here. Because Mother had not been able to find a brown baby doll, so she had made a brown baby doll, but it hadn't had time to dry overnight. And so Lillian had a brown baby, finally, and she had to alter her song a little bit. I got a brown baby, tweedle-deedle-dee. I got a brown baby that looks like me. I got a brown baby, yes I do. I've got a brown baby, I've named her Blue. Because even though she had pretty brown skin, she still had blue eyes, because she used to be a white baby doll. When my mother turned about 16, and this is a story of my mother and my grandmother and what she did to give my mother mirrors and the toys that she had. She bought her a real brown baby doll that she finally found in a store. And this is a picture of Amelia earlier on. She was about, I guess, 10. And then a few days ago with the doll that my mother got that was actually a brown baby doll. So that's the brown baby story. Lillian is my mother and Dorothy was my grandmother, so this is a story that's a part of my heritage. And it should be a children's book, probably with a CD link or a link with the storytelling, but it isn't yet. More on that in a minute. When I got the news last year that I'd been selected to give the Butler lecture, I initially felt elation, excited that ChLA had that much trust in me. Then I had an oh crap moment. The still small voice of the academic ego that always whispers how little I know, how little I've read, and how unworthy I am even to be up here. Well, despite never being able to silence those voices completely, I decided that while I have the floor for a few minutes, I would use this time to try to push back the walls of academia a bit and offer a presentation that might make room for ideas and forms of expression that are rare at academic conferences. At the very least, I think I've prepared a presentation for this 8 a.m. session for which everyone will stay awake. It's the least I can do in exchange for your getting up, getting dressed, getting your tea or coffee, and being here for the 2019 Butler Lecture. For that, I thank you. I also want to say that although it now seems to be necessary for the ChLA board to create a code of conduct, something many organizations have always had because of aggressive behavior exhibited at conferences, I've always found ChLA a welcoming organization and hope that we can all continue to make it so. I, for one, count on this nurturing space for exchanging new ideas and do my part to open doors for others through my involvement in ChLA. And here's my gold standard when I'm at conferences and listening to presentations. If Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop were the presenter, whatever scholarly comment I have to say, if it's not appropriate in content and tone to say to the esteemed Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, then I don't say it to a peer, a doctoral student, a master's student, and certainly not an undergraduate student. I hope that we can all agree that this is an important part of why we exist as an organization. I've begun with a personal story purposely because it's an illustration of where I want to go with this talk. I want to talk about one of the tenets of critical race theory that explains why there are so many absences in children's literature, why there are so many stories like this one by people of color, about people of color, that aren't being told in this genre, and a second tenet that points to some answers about how to transform the genre in ways that will start to change the conversation. The conversation I'm talking about is this one. We have all heard a gracious plenty about Nancy Larrick's Bellwether 1965 article, The All-White World of Children's Literature, that sounded the alarm and served as a wake-up call about all children who had been left out of the historical record of children's literature. And we have appreciated the use and used the Times op-ed pieces written by father and son, Walter Dean and Chris Myers, who I was delighted to see yesterday, in the 2014 article on this same topic. But even they acknowledged that theirs was a follow-up to a conversation that was already 50 years old. Most of us are also quite familiar with this infographic that Sarah Park-Dahlen helped to mastermind to enable both adults and children to see what's missing in the children's book industry, who gets portrayed, who gets left out, and just how much more likely it is to see yourself in a book if you're a rabbit than if you are a Native American, Latin American, Asian American, or African American child. This next generation of visually represented statistics also comes as no surprise to anybody who has been working in the field for a while. This visual makes clear that even in 2017, even with the impact of we need diverse books, we need diverse reviewers, Reading While White, and a host of other public forums calling for diversifying the genre, this is still where we are. Why is it that in 2017, while 61% of the American population is white, 85.8% of the books that year were published by white authors? And how can 14% of America be African American, but only 3.3% of the books published that year be written by African American authors? Critical race theory has some things to say about this. According to CRT theorists Richard Delgado and Jean Stefanchik, racism, rather than being aberrational, is the common, everyday experience of most people of color in this country. That was a quote. It's normal science, and therefore to be expected. Racist systems also serve the dominant population, most often socially as well as economically, which discourages change that might alter the status quo. In addition, Robin DiAngelo, University of Washington professor who wrote White Fragility, says that based on a widespread and mistaken definition of racism as individual, conscious, and intentional, it's impossible for the average white individual to look deeply at their socialization and see their own internalized racism. But DiAngelo implores us to change the way we define and think about racism. She says that we have all inherited a racist worldview, that we are, quote, literally swimming in racist waters, end quote. And that's not just white people swimming in the water, but that's all of us. The impact of those waters is that racism surrounds all of our interactions, keeping oppressive systems in place, and it also means that it's much easier to ignore its pervasive presence than to do the hard work of inward gazing, to acknowledge racism in ourselves, and do the exceedingly hard work of making change. I'll give you an example, a personal one, of which I am not proud, that makes clear how racism works. When I was about 5, I received for Christmas from relatives 2 of the same type of baby dolls, a white baby go bye-bye and a black baby go bye-bye. My mother was excited about the black doll, but several weeks later when I was playing with the white doll, she asked me where the black doll was. I told her I put her away. When my mom asked me why, I told her, because she's too black. This is the impact of swimming in racist waters every day. This is also why stories like The Brown Baby, and maybe even this story about My Baby Go Bye-Byes, need to be told. These belong to what critical race theory calls counter-storytelling. According to CRT, counter-storytelling includes stories that, quote, challenge, displace, or mock pernicious narratives and beliefs, end quote, or, quote, writing that aims to cast doubt on the validity of accepted premises or myths, especially ones held by the majority, end quote. While this narrative strategy has typically been used in courts of law to highlight the way, quote, race is real and is not real or objective but constructed, end quote, authors of color and others have also used it to combat racist literary portrayals of people of color. In this talk, I will argue that because racism is endemic to our culture, because we all swim in these waters every day, and also because of the systemic and structural racism that exists in the children's publishing industry, maybe it's time to do things differently. Maybe it's time to take a more creative approach to Rudine Sims Bishop's windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. Maybe it's time for us to create new doors and open new windows that make a more creative and personal investment in the change we seek. I will approach counter-storytelling from 3 different angles today and share with you the results. And this is how I do activism. Personal counter stories, of which The Brown Baby is one. Repurposing of children's literature to create musical counter stories. Read-a-Rama as a living counter story. Back to the counter stories. As with The Brown Baby, this next one comes from my own experiences, and I'll share some information afterward that will give you an idea of its cultural significance. When I was growing up, my mother worked for South Carolina Electric and Gas Company. She actually had a degree in home economics from Pratt Institute. And the reason she lived in South Carolina and had a degree from a New York institution is at this time, South Carolina was paying students to go out of state to avoid integrating South Carolina higher education institutions. So my mother does not have a degree from the University of South Carolina, but she does have a degree from Pratt. She came back to South Carolina and taught middle school for 2 years, and then she got hired by then she got hired by South Carolina Electric and Gas Company, SCE&G, the big power company. And one of the perks of working for SCE&G is that she got access to Pine Island. Now, Pine Island was a country club that was owned by SCE&G. It's right on Lake Murray, really beautiful. They had shelters. We would often take family and friends out there for picnics. It had a splash pad. The lake was right there. That was, had access for swimming. It also had a great swing set, a merry-go-round, much better equipment than my neighborhood had. But the best thing that my brother and I thought about Pine Island was the pool. This was the biggest pool we'd ever been in. It was huge. And because we were both really excited about swimming, our parents took us to the pool. We would go, they say you gotta swim only after you have 20 minutes. So we would swim first and then go eat, wait our 20 minutes and go back to swim. And so we went and paid our quarter the first time we went. We're really excited. And my parents could not swim. So they would sit up on the deck part and watch us, and the lifeguards would, keep an eye on everyone. So Tony and I got in, we were swimming around. They had a high dive, a low dive. It was really awesome. And probably the cleanest pool and locker room that you would ever see. Ours in our neighborhood was in a poor black neighborhood, so the locker rooms were kind of nasty and all of that. So this was just pristine. So we went in and got in the pool. We're swimming around, and pretty soon we heard, "Hey Timmy, come on out of that water. It's time to go eat." So Daddy came and got Timmy and took him on out of the water. Pretty soon, "Hey Susie, come on. Your grandma say it's time to go." Susie goes. Pretty soon, "Hey John, come on out of there. You've been swimming long enough." Pretty soon, Tony and I look around, and we're the only kids in the pool. All the white kids had gotten out of the pool. And the thing to know is that my mother, for a long time, was the only, this is how she put it, the only black person not pushing a broom at SCE&G. She was the only black professional there. So we were the only ones who made use of Pine Island Club. And that's okay if it happens one time. But when it happens over and over and over again, that's not an accident. I never had a conversation with my parents about this situation, but it's something that I think must have been really hard for them to deal with, knowing that they had access to this beautiful facility, but then having their children have these macroaggressions constantly happen to them. So this story relates to my growing up in the integrated South, but it also relates to my identity as a swimmer. Keep in mind that according to a 2017 study by the USA Swimming Foundation, 64% of African American children cannot swim. That's 2017. That's compared with 45% of Hispanic children and 40% of Caucasian children. I'm therefore among the minority of African Americans who can swim, and I have this skill because of the commitment and investment that my parents made nearly 50 years ago. And although I swim about 3 miles a week, I'm often one of the very few brown people in the pool and the only African American. My mother couldn't swim or ride a bike. That's another story. My father couldn't swim. My mom's one sibling and my dad's 6 siblings could not swim, and none of their parents could swim. A contributing factor on my mother's side was that my mother's cousin, Essex Clark, died at 11 years old in 1944 from drowning. This caused all the adults in the family to warn the kids, "You stay away from that water." My mother, knowing how wrong-headed that was, determined to get my brother and me comfortable in the water as soon as possible. But since she knew neither my dad, who was so petrified of water, I never knew him to even take a bath. My dad always took showers. He was really deathly afraid of water. Neither one of them could help us if we got into trouble in the water, so they always took us to pools with lifeguards and got us into swimming lessons as soon as possible. Mom tried to get me in at 4. They didn't take kids that young, so I went back at 5, and I learned to swim. Since the way to waterproof a child is to make sure that they can swim and swim well. So this is how we are raising the next generation of children in our family, all of whom are strong swimmers. This is Amelia and her cousins several years ago swimming at Camp Read-a-Rama, and swimming is always a part of this camp as well. I have a picture book manuscript of this story that I hope will one day be a children's book, but telling the Pine Island story as one that is neither too dark nor tells a falsely happy ending is what I've found most challenging. Yet it is counter stories like these that could help young readers understand that African Americans historically didn't go from slavery to whites-only water fountains and racially segregated bathrooms to Obama. Stories like these lie in the interstices, in the historical gray area between black and white that can instill in African American kids like I was a lifetime of mistrust of white spaces, a concept that Liz and I talked about yesterday. White spaces that whisper even to my 53-year-old self, am I good enough to be here? And that's real. Hence, personal counter stories like these can bring to light cultural phenomena like just how late it was historically when really nice brown baby dolls, an African American mama could be proud to give her daughter, became available on the market, and how few African American children can swim. I've always believed in edutainment, educational material wrapped in entertaining skins, and counter stories are, I think, an effective way to help both children and adults gain an understanding of lives they have not lived. My second approach to counter storytelling is a musical one. As I mentioned in my dedication, Dream Keepers for Children of the Sun, the children's literature of Arna Bontemps and Langston Hughes, is a book project that has been percolating and sputtering along for more than 10 years, and I've decided to get my students involved in it in the fall to push myself to finish it over the next year. One chapter of the book that I have not yet written focuses on all of the picture books that have been published recently that either offer contemporary illustrations of Hughes's poems or tell beautifully illustrated stories of Hughes's life and work. The Dreamkeeper and Other Poems, originally published in 1932 and illustrated by Helen Sewell, best known for her artwork in Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House books, includes 59 poems that Hughes selected for young people, many of which are his best-known poems. The 75th anniversary edition of The Dreamkeeper, illustrated by Brian Pinckney's Scratchboard Illustrations, published in 1994, has a 75th anniversary reissue that was published in 2007. Coming Home and Langston's Train Ride are biographies of particular episodes in Hughes's life. Coming Home is a biography of Langston Hughes's early life of growing up with his grandmother in poverty. When his grandmother could no longer take care of him, a kind family took him in, and there Hughes had enough to eat for the very first time in his life. Langston's Train Ride is about the circumstances in which he composed The Negro Speaks of Rivers and how this turning point helped him to see himself as a writer for the first time. I Too Am America, The Negro Speaks of Rivers each are sumptuously illustrated. They sumptuously illustrate the titular Hughes poem. In Love to Langston, a brilliant book of tribute poems, Tony Medina uses episodes of Hughes's life, often traumatic ones, as springboards for new poems that echo verses that Hughes wrote. And Visiting Langston tells of a little girl's contemporary visit to Langston Hughes's house, which inspires her writing. Brian Collier's amazing collage illustrations bring both Hughes's legacy and this girl's appreciation of him to life. As a small aside, I wanted to show you my birthday gift for my husband this year. Glenn works for the Seattle Opera, and after having my doc student, Liz, who's an accomplice for many things, steal my Renaissance bonnet out of my office, Glenn had the opera's milliner make a pattern from the hat. He emailed Brian Collier and asked for an image from one of his picture books and permission to have it made into fabric, both of which Brian granted, and this is my new hat. I do so love Brian Collier and his art, so I hope he'll illustrate the new book as well. On to the song titled Langston Hughes. Perhaps I can call this a musical collage of Hughes's counter stories, since all of these picture books provide new perspectives for young readers on Hughes's life and work. And Lee and Libby are my ChLA songbirds, so I asked them to help me with something. The keeper of dreams. He wrote jazz poems no one had ever seen, from Aunt Stu's stories to the Be-Weary blues, mother to son in my dressed up shoes. Hughes wrote poems while he was still a teen for the school newspaper and the Brownies magazine. He brought to life a maple sugar child, and he wove a tale of fairies with a rainbow style. Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes wrote poems for the people, and he loved the blues. Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes wrote poems for the people, and he lived the blues. Langston's mother was a Rolling Stone, raised by his grandma who gave him a home. Told true stories of John Brown's raid, of Lewis Sheridan Leary and the price he paid. Langston did not like his father much, who said of black people they were such and such. Langston ignored what he had to say, that writing for a living would just never pay. Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes wrote poems for the people, and he loved the blues. Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes wrote poems for the people, and he lived the blues. Langston set out to sail the big sea and visit lots of people who were black like me. When the Negro speaks of rivers, he can talk a while, of the Ganges, the Euphrates, Mississippi, and the Nile. He wrote of a boy who went to town and marveled at the people on the merry-go-round. How can I ride circus? There ain't no back. Is there a Jim Crow section for a kid that's black? Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes wrote poems for the people, and he loved the blues. Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes wrote poems for the people, and he lived the blues. Langston said that jazz makes me sing, but the blues is my muse that inspires my swing. I'm so black and blue right now, I wish I could be happy, but I don't know how. He said Harlem had a soul to help black children grow up brave and bold, nurturing talent and paving the way from the Harlem Renaissance to the present day. Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes wrote poems for the people, and he loved the blues. Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes wrote poems for the people, and he lived the blues. Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes wrote poems for the people, and he loved the blues. Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes wrote poems for the people, and he lived the blues. Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes wrote poems for the people, and he lived the blues. Books like Ebony Elizabeth Thomas's The Dark Fantastic, Race and the Imagination of From Harry Potter to the Hunger Games, which just came out a few days ago, so I have not yet read, make us keenly aware of what's been missing in the genre for far too long. In this case, speculative fiction that features black and brown young people. Thomas notes that this points not just to a failure of the children's book industry, but a failure of imagination. In fact, if you remove from the genre all the African-American children's literature about slavery, civil rights, and key historical figure, you have very little left. This is beginning to change, but because of the high percentage of books about key black historical figures in the genre and also the prevalence of counter-storytelling in them, I decided to focus on a few of my favorites among these in this next song titled, You've Got to Read. Although only one of these has an own voices writer, all of them are illustrated by African-American illustrators, and in one case, a pair comprised of an African-American and Asian-American illustrator. As I was working this spring on plans for our 8th summer of Camp Read-a-Rama, which Dr. Rachel Washington and I started 10 years ago at Clemson University, I thought about which picture book biographies tell counter stories that have stuck with me. I also thought about which of these might offer some inspiration and entertainment for 4 to 11-year-olds who read and sing and dance and participate in hands-on science, art, and outdoor activities at Camp Read-a-Rama to learn to, as we say, live books. I chose these 4 texts as the focus of this song. Most of us have read and or taught texts by and or about Richard Wright, Zora Neale Hurston, Frederick Douglass, and Martin Luther King Jr. And fortunately, in most American schools, these visionaries are taught because they are part of the canon. But these picture books delve into their childhoods and talk about how conflicts they faced as young people shaped the adults they became. They also tell counter stories that often get left out of textbook renditions of their biographies. In Richard Wright and the Library Card, which adapts an episode of Wright's life from his autobiography, Black Boy, Richard's mother taught him to read from newspaper text. He realized as a young person that a library card could give him unlimited access to the books he loved, the books that fed his mind. And he gained access to a library when a white man, Jim Falk, with whom he worked in Memphis, loaned him a library card. Despite maltreatment by the librarians and white patrons, Richard checked out as many books as he could and read voraciously. For him, this was a life-changing experience. What I find most instructive about this picture book as a counter story is both the nastiness of the librarian, I teach librarians, so I'm always attentive to that, who seemed to make it her personal mission to keep Richard from accessing books, and all the ways he must deceive the library staff just to be able to check out books and read. When the librarian asks him if he's sure the books aren't for him, he responds, "No, ma'am, heck, I can't even read." But when he finally has earned enough money to take the train north, quote, the words came back to him, the story's more real than the train itself. Every page was a ticket to freedom, to the place where he would always be free, end quote. Literacy and learning also figure prominently in Zora Hurston and the Chinaberry Tree, but not surprisingly, the oral tradition is also a highly prized part of Zora's childhood. Zora Neale Hurston's novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, portrays protagonist Janie as a gender-bending woman who finally gets, in her 3rd marriage, the relationship she's been seeking that privileges love over obligation. But Zora Hurston and the Chinaberry Tree also paints Hurston as a tree-climbing, overalls-wearing gender-bender herself, whose religious father attempted to control her, but whose mother taught her to dream. In so many words, this book also says that Hurston was nosy, a habit that helped her gather the stories she otherwise would not have heard that later contributed to her storytelling, her writing, and her vocation as an anthropologist. Words Set Me Free, the story of young Frederick Douglass, offers a first-person narrative that opens with these words. My mama was Harriet Bailey. They say my master, Captain Aaron Anthony, was my daddy. Oh, the conversations these opening sentences can generate with children. Frederick ended up on a plantation 12 miles from his mother, who would walk the distance in the night to watch him sleep. This picture book also describes and illustrates slave children eating corn mush with dirty hands out of a pig trough, an historical fact that textbooks will rarely tell young readers. Frederick also narrates that his master, quote, rented me out to make extra money, end quote. When his new mistress, whom he comments seems not to understand the difference between a slave and a servant, commits to teaching Frederick to read despite the illegality of this act, Frederick mentions hearing of a boy on his former plantation who had his thumbs chopped off when he was caught reading. Frederick's lessons end when his master finds out about them and rails at his wife. He should know nothing but to obey his master, to do as he is told. If you teach him how to read, there would be no keeping him. It would forever unfit him to be a slave, end quote. The rest is history. Nearly every child in America learns about Martin Luther King in school, and Martin's Big Words emphasizes how the big words Martin heard as a child in church, in his home, in his community, and spoke as a civil rights activist instilled persistence required of a leader who seeks to effect change. Though this picture book is written for very young children, it says of civil rights activists, quote, "They were jailed and beaten and murdered, but they kept on marching," end quote. While I was Clemson faculty, I participated in the service learning projects that I assigned to my students and had 2 book buddies with whom I read weekly and followed from Head Start into upper elementary school. When Martin's Big Words came out, I read it to them, and when I got to the page that says, "On the second day there, he was shot, he died," Tennille stopped me and told me that her grandma had told her that Martin Luther King was a good man. Why would somebody kill him? I explained that a lot of people didn't like what he had to say because he was speaking up for black people that didn't have rights. Tennille and Chandrea then insisted that I flip to the back flap of the book, asking if the guy who shot Martin Luther King would be pictured on the book flap, where they often saw the author and the illustrator's face. They wanted to see who shot Martin Luther King. Rappaport's words, with Brian Collier's striking collage illustrations, had given them hard-to-swallow food for thought that perhaps other renditions of MLK's life, designed for 4-year-olds, had glossed over. So this is You've Got to Read. You've got to read like your life depends on it. You've got to read something all the time. You've got to read like your life depends on it, 'cause books will open up and free your mind. Richard was a poor boy who sure loved words. His grandpa's stories he would retain. A white man loaned him a library card and his life would never be the same. You got to read like your life depends on it. You got to read something all the time. You've got to read like your life depends on it, 'cause books will open up and free your mind. Zora had a father who was strict and stern. Horizons were her mother's delight. Zora heard tales told around the fire to learn that stories keep us alive. You got to read like your life depends on it. You got to read something all the time. You've got to read like your life depends on it, 'cause books will open up and free your mind. Frederick Douglass was a slave and he knew quite well how to make the white people see. Once you learn to read, even if you're enslaved, you will forever be free. You got to read like your life depends on it. You got to read something all the time. You got to read like your life depends on it, 'cause books will open up and free your mind. Martin Luther King spoke some big, bold words. They bombed his house and threw him in jail. But he read and he wrote and he spoke and sang so that peace and harmony would prevail. You got to read like your life depends on it. You got to read something all the time. You got to read like your life depends on it, 'cause books will open up and free your mind. I said they'll open up and free your mind. You gotta open up and free your mind. and a third original musical counter story. Why are we still in 2019 talking about The Snowy Day, which was published in 1962? I would argue that The Snowy Day has made itself relevant for so long because it spoke as a counter story in 1962 on many levels and still speaks as one today. This book and the constellation of stories about Peter's friends function as counter stories in 5 different ways: autobiographically, dispositionally, artistically, in terms of Keats's book design, and in his attention to children and their responses to his books. And I'm well aware that Keats is not a known voices writer, but I give him kudos for doing what he did at a time when no other white illustrators or authors were attending to mirrors for black and brown children in the literature. Let me explain. Autobiographically. Born Jacob Ezra Katz, Keats grew up in poverty. A child of Eastern European Jewish parents who immigrated to Brooklyn, he fictionalized many of his own personal experiences in his books. A 1972 article in the Times Literary Supplement lauds Keats for, quote, the consistency with which he transmutes the everyday existence of poor American children living in seedy apartments to something rich and teeming with possibilities, end quote. Claudia Nawson, author of The Snowy Day and the Artist of Ezra Jack Keats, notes that, quote, no earlier books for the young featured these gritty landscapes. Keats not only made such backgrounds an integral part of his stories, but he also rendered the squalid city settings beautiful through his mastery of collage and his expressive paintings, end quote. He knew, intimately knew, this place that became Peter's neighborhood and the experiences that he and his friends had with snow, bullies, trash heaps, relationships, and more. And although Keats had illustrated 25 books for other writers before he created The Snowy Day, because he never saw children of color in these books, although I will note that there were some, and the authors for whom he illustrated never wrote about them, he decided that when he had the opportunity, he would illustrate black and brown children. In 1960, Keats illustrated a Puerto Rican protagonist in Pat Scher's picture book, My Dog is Lost, a notable work of inclusion since Latinx characters were even more absent in children's literature than were African American children. But Keats said, quote, when I did my first book about a black kid, I wanted black kids and white kids to know that he's there, end quote. He also said, my book would have him there simply because he should have been there all along, end quote. You only need to scratch the surface of Keats's life to find where the tales of Peter, Louis, Archie, Jenny, and the others come from. But let it suffice to say that through making something beautiful for and about children of color out of what had been a difficult and painful childhood, Keats both wrote a counter story for his own life and countered the prevailing stereotype that nothing of value exists in the urban ghetto where black and brown children live and play. Dispositionally. It's also clear from the accounts of artists who knew Keats and admired or even emulated his work that his disposition was oriented toward composing counterstories. Jerry Pinkney, dedicated African-American illustrator, best known for his watercolor picture books, discusses Keats's dispositions for writing counterstories about children of color when it would have been easier to maintain the white status quo that existed in children's publishing. Pinkney said that in 1983, he got a call from the California African American Museum wanting to display his work in an exhibit called Lasting Impressions, illustrating African American children's books. They wanted to include, quote, those illustrators whose work demonstrated excellence in portraying people of color. It was important that the works endow the characters with a sense of dignity and self-respect, and above all else, that they celebrate African American life and culture. Ezra Jack Keats was one of the illustrators who led the list. His role in giving an African American a central part in the story was a benchmark in mainstream publishing. Did Ezra think of himself as courageous for presenting realistic images of black families? Was he an advocate for the disenfranchised, for those who were left out of the mainstream? I suspect he simply saw all people with heart, eye, and a paintbrush equally. He enlarged the world of children's literature by instilling in characters with energy and by filling each page with exquisite design and dazzling color, end quote. In other words, Keats was not an activist who was marching in the streets to bring the civil rights movement into being, but he relied on paper, paint, and both memories, and a fondness for the variety of children with whom he grew up to create mirrors and windows in Rudy and Sims Bishop's characterization that all children needed to see. Book design. The process of designing The Snowy Day also points to its role as a counterstory. According to Anita Silvey, The book had originally been designed to alternate color pages and black and white pages, but when Annis Duff, Viking editor, saw the dummy of the book, she encouraged Keats to illustrate it all in color, despite the expense of full-color reproductions and the challenge that Keats's intricate collages presented for color separation technology of the time. The cover image that Keats had proposed also changed because of Duff's insistence that Peter needed to be featured more prominently on the cover. This also points to the fact that conditions must be favorable on the editorial side, as well as with authors and illustrators, to affect change in an industry that was then and still is largely white. Artistically, Keats's intentionality about composing The Snowy Day as a counterstory also relates to its artistic process in its creation. Reynolds Ruffins, who won a Coretta Scott King Illustrator Award for Miso-So, makes clear that Keats had a special dedication to making art depicting children of color in an honorable way and with meticulous care. Ruffins writes, quote, "As a young illustrator, I was more interested in the bigger bucks and fast turnaround of the advertising business, so I was a bit bewildered by Ezra's great dedication to children's books. He could spend days considering character, color, and composition. I've watched him ponder one or another color of paper he had hand-dipped, trying to choose between them. All such decisions were painstakingly arrived at. Yes, from this effort, he panned a golden classic, The Snowy Day. He said Keats turned snow into gold." Ruffins also commented on the uniqueness of Keats's contribution. Quote, "In the 60s, Ezra believed there should be children's book characters other than Dick and Jane, their granny, and their damn bluebirds. And he did something about it," end quote. Finally, attention to children. Keats is integrating his own life into his work, his disposition toward characters of color, his book design and artistic commitment to lifting up those who had been left out of the genre all figure into Keats's composition of the counter stories featuring Peter and his friends, but his identification with children and their responses to his work also contributed. Cherishing the feedback he got from his readers, he often quoted this favorite letter from a child, quote, "We like you because you have the mind of a child," end quote. Susan Hirschman, who served as his editor for many years, said that Keats agonized over the mistakes he made in his early picture books. When a child pointed out that a guinea pig's tale in Millicent Selsam's How Animals Sleep, which Keats illustrated, was actually the tale of a rat, naked rather than hairy as it should be, he wrote letters of apology to both the mother and the child. In a better-known conflict, when Nancy Larrick, former president of the International Reading Association, published the 1965 The All-White World of Children's Books in the Saturday Review, she attacked Keats for his portrayal of the mother in The Snowy Day. Though praising the book for its sympathetic depiction of black characters in general, she labeled the mother a stereotype, quote, "a huge figure in a gaudy plaid dress," end quote. Keats faced further critique in the 1970s from the Council on Interracial Books for Children, who, though this was long before the Own Voices movement, basically told him that a white man had no business writing about black characters, which, quote, "was stealing money from legitimate African-American creators." Absolutely devastated by the criticism, Keats stopped working altogether, end quote. He picked up the craft again only at the insistence and encouragement of his friend, Augusta Baker, the New York Public Library's first black coordinator of children's services, who praised Keats's work and encouraged him to put the criticisms behind him and move on. He did. Summary. Anita Silvey notes that Keats's contribution of The Snowy Day is significant as a 1960s picture book with substantive staying power. Where the Wild Things Are is another, but unlike Sindak's book and body of work, Keats made an additional contribution in helping to bring multicultural publishing to the forefront as both a concern and a challenge to be met. This exhortation to widen representation in the field of children's literature obviously still resonates today. Keats is not an Own Voices writer, and he didn't always get everything right, but I believe that the deliberateness and care with which he told counter stories through Peter and his circle of friends makes him worthy to be included in this tribute to Black childhood. Furthermore, this next song, which I've titled Peter's Song, is the first tune that came to me as I started considering this presentation about a year ago. Often I get song snippets when I'm driving. I'm not sure why that is. And they nag at me until I do something about them. So what I got was, "What makes the snow disappear from my pocket overnight?" And this is what it's become. Peter, and I love my dog. When I whistle for Willie, he comes right along. He's black and he's brown and he's low to the ground. When he's looking for me, I'm happy to be found. What makes the snow disappear from my pocket overnight? When can I go out to play? 'Cause when I turn my toes like this and I turn my toes like that, surely they will lead me somewhere. I have a sister, and she has a chair that used to be mine, but now she will sit there. My cradle's now pink, it's as plain as this day. It's time to call Willie so we can run away. What makes the snow disappear from my pocket overnight? When can I go out to play? 'Cause when I turn my toes like this and I turn my toes like that, surely they will lead me somewhere. Louis, Roberto, the man in the moon, Jenny and Maggie will come to play soon. Keats made these mirrors and windows for me, starting with Peter under a snow-covered tree. What makes the snow disappear from my pocket overnight? When can I go out to play? 'Cause when I turn my toes like this and I turn my toes like that, surely they will lead me somewhere. My name is Ezra, and I had a dream to take that boy Peter from Life magazine and paint him on pages for brown kids to see. That books work for kids who look a lot like me. What makes the snow disappear from my pocket overnight? When can I go out to play? 'Cause when I turn my toes like this and I turn my toes like that, surely they will lead me somewhere. I know surely they will lead me somewhere. I said surely they will lead me somewhere. I want to let you know that if all of my help worked out, the very last slide, those 3 songs are recorded for you to download. They are, thank you. This is original music, so if you share with others, just pass along the copyright information, and that would be great. And also, the next chunk is about Read-a-Rama, which has been my labor of love for the last nearly 20 years. But I would appreciate a donation to Read-a-Rama in exchange for the songs. I do want, let's see, there we go. So, Read-a-Rama as a living counter story. And I call it this because, 1, it wasn't something I had anybody's permission to do, especially in an English department. 2, it has never been funded in any consistent way, but we keep doing it anyway. 3, it serves the kids who are most underserved, especially those who are most subject to summer slide, that 3 months of learning loss. 4, it's been thrown out of a major university. 5, it has produced lots of success stories for children who were slated to fail, and these successes have also been documented in a social science research study. So Read-a-Rama started in 2001 as a service learning project for my students. And how many English classes have outreach? So it was a little bit of a thing to try to convince my department that this was a valid thing to be doing. But children's literature really lends itself to that. So each Read-a-Rama program always has a theme and a set of books. At every Read-a-Rama program, every child gets a free book because we know that building home libraries is really important for literacy development. It always brings together college students who are trained in the study of children's literature in English, education, library science, art, whatever field they come from, brings them together with children in underserved communities. And for camp, we position camp in communities where children are most subject to that learning loss. Dr. Washington, my friend and co-director for Read-a-Rama for quite some time, we met in 2008, and we taught a class in 2009 that was called Ethnic Children's Literature and Camp Read-a-Rama, where we sort of developed this method. And I told her about my passion for taking my degree in English Studies, Children's Literature, and my Girl Scout passion, putting them together to make Camp Read-a-Rama. She bought into that vision and has been a part of this project ever since. The mantras for Camp Read-a-Rama are 100% engagement, 100% of the time, because dead time will kill your program. We ran camp out of Clemson University for 5 summers. Out of the University of South Carolina for the first 3 years, I was the Augusta Baker Chair. And in 2014, my director and dean called me into the office to tell me that Camp Read-a-Rama was not a good use of my time and was not commensurate with the goals of the Baker Chair. If they thought that that would stop me from pursuing my dream, they had no idea of who I was. So we sought help from the USC Law Clinic, nonprofit law clinic, and with their help got incorporated in the state of South Carolina, obtained 501c3, and went through the process of trademarking Booker, the Read-a-Rama bookworm. And by that time, I was beginning to see that if Read-a-Rama wasn't welcome at USC, neither was I. So when Dean Harry Bruce called me up from the information school at the University of Washington about the Cleary professorship, at first I thought, did he call the wrong number? Does he know where I live? And who? Yeah, no. But later, I realized what an opportunity, amazing opportunity this could be for both me and for Read-a-Rama. I wasn't wrong. I arrived at the iSchool in 2016, and in 2017, we held our first summer of camp at Compass on Dexter, an affordable housing complex for formerly homeless families. Our themes that summer were Read-a-Rama rocks, geology, and music. Because I had a kid, I was asking the kids, what themes do you want? One kid said, crystals. I was like, what do you do with that? And another kid said, music. So we put those together and make Read-a-Rama rocks. The other theme was Read-a-Rama Tell Your Story, and as you can imagine, kids who have had housing insecurity have some very amazing stories. We provided 2 weeks of camp for 35 children from Compass Housing Alliance and Mary's Place Homeless Shelter. We took 7 field trips in 10 days and started a long-term partnership with Compass that continues to be mutually beneficial now. In the last year, we have reconstituted the Read-a-Rama board, shut down the corporation in South Carolina and reincorporated in Washington State, renewed our 501c3 status, and established 4 new partnerships. Between May and August, we have programming at the Magnuson Park YMCA in Seattle, 8 weeks of after-school programming, 2 weeks of summer camp at Dearborn Park International School in South Seattle, the very first Camp Read-a-Rama to be run by a school librarian, in the most diverse zip code in the city, in fact. 7 weeks of camp at North Spokane Public Library in Eastern Washington, the first camp to be run in a library by librarians and AmeriCorps Vista volunteers. And again, 2 weeks of camp at Compass on Dexter, that's my baby, I'll be running that one. My students and I also provided 4 1.5-hour programs this year at Compass and plan to expand to Seattle Public Libraries next year. In addition, we're in early conversations with Kent State University about a partnership that would enable us to begin spreading Read-a-Rama through academic programs like those most of us teach in. So stay tuned for more details about the scaling up of Read-a-Rama, especially if you are not satisfied to keep your children's literature expertise in the ivory tower, but want to effect change in ways that will matter for children in your communities, while it also gives your students hands-on experience with kids and community engagement. If you want to support our efforts, you can download and enjoy the songs. The QR code will be on the last slide. And while you're there, donate to Read-a-Rama. We're in search of a few board members who are now in South Carolina, Washington, Illinois, and Georgia, including Liz and Tarini. If you want to be a part of the scaling up through academic children's literature and children's culture programs, let me know. That'll be on the horizon. And we could use some extra hands. We also need a lawyer, if anybody's got a pro bono lawyer who could help us out. So as I've talked about personal counter stories and picture book musical counter stories, as well as the living counter story that Read-a-Rama has become on a number of levels, I'd like to end by encouraging you to think about what your counter stories are and how you might bring them to life in your own creative ways, because we need to hear them, and maybe some kids need to hear them too. And I want to end with a final song that is actually in preparation for next year's conference. When I had a 5-year career in outdoor environmental education, I wrote a song called The Big Blue Marble. And The Big Blue Marble has been, I wrote it in '89, and it has been sung in Tulare County at the Clemmy School of Science and Conservation every year since then. So I'm like a rock star in Tulare County, California. But anyway, I went to a celebration they had, and I looked up, and there was a woman who must have been 90 years old singing my song. I was like, wow. It was just like. So anyway, I have a few acknowledgments. I want to acknowledge several people who helped me prepare for this talk, or counter keynote, if you will. Nate Bogopolsky, who is one of my music coaches, whose business is called Music in the Stack with Styles. He and his partner enter Seattle school classrooms and within an hour or two facilitate children's writing original music about books that inspire them. It's amazing what they do. Then they record those songs and make them available on Styles' expansive website. Mike Eisenberg, former dean of the UW School, who took our school from 100 to 1,000 students, who is also a guitarist extraordinaire. He coached me through guitar challenges I could not solve. Like, I've never played a blues song before, so Richard will have to give me a few more lessons later. Molly Barnes, my church choir director at Ballard First Lutheran, helped me with song lyrics and harmonies. Lee Talley and Libby Gruner, who are my ChLA songbird buddies, whom we've sung at several ChLAs, but they graciously agreed to let me send them drafts of the songs that I composed so that they could be up here to sing with me today. Liz Mills is my right arm, and for the last 3 years that I've been at UW, and this presentation would not have been possible without her encouragement to do what you do, do your thing. And I want to give my daughter, Amelia, who's at the Shakespeare Festival in Oregon right now, a shout out because she's 16, and this is her first week out of school, but she's the only one with whom I shared all the drafts of these original songs, since my music has always been in her bones, and I can count on sharing a new tune with her and hearing her whistle it in the bathroom a few hours later. Nobody else gives me that kind of artistic support and affirmation. So here is the Big Blue Marble. All right, so I'll sing a little bit, you sing it back. We will love the earth wherever we roam. For this big blue marble is our home. And we know that everyone in it. And we know that everything in it. Will always be a part of who we are. All right, and this is how it goes, all put together. We will love the earth wherever we roam, for this big blue marble is our home. And we know that everyone in it, and we know that everything in it, will always be a part of who we are. And then you substitute something like, we will love the rain. We're Seattleites now, so we love the rain. We will love the rain. We will love the rain wherever we roam. For this big blue marble is our home. And we know that everyone in it, and we know that everything in it, will always be a part of who we are. The trees. We will love the trees wherever we roam. For this big blue marble is our home. And we know that everyone in it, and we know that everything in it, will always be a part of who we are. Books. The books. We will love the books wherever we roam. For this big blue marble is our home. And we know that everyone in it, and we know that everything in it, will always be a part of who we are. The earth for the last verse. We will love the earth wherever we roam. For this big blue marble is our home. And we know that
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much for your gift of music and insight and love. We appreciate you so much. Please download the songs, donate to Camp Read-a-Rama. I just want to pause at this point and give a little program note. We don't have time for questions, but Michelle is one of us and will be here, and you can ask her all the questions. And she's so generous, she'll definitely talk with all of you. Yes, come on up.
So because there were so many people involved in getting these songs like recorded and all of that, if this doesn't work, it should work by the end of the day. If there's no songs there, once you see, because Mike Eisenberg was getting them uploaded like 4 o'clock this morning, so.
Good to know. So I encourage all of you to return in just a few minutes at 9:30 for our business meeting. Now, that does not sound exciting, a follow-up to this. However, you want to know how the sausage is made. You want to know what goes on behind the scenes at ChLA. I know you do. And it's going to be really interesting for those of you, and that sounds convincing. It really is going to be interesting for those of you who haven't attended before. Please come on back because we're going to talk about the workings of the organization and the dynamics of the organization. We want everybody to be involved in that. And we'll have a moment, too, for announcements so that if you have something that you'd like to bring to the membership, you have a call for papers, you have a conference coming up, you have something you want everybody to hear about, you'll have the space to do that. So come on back at 9:30. Hit the bathrooms, have some water, come on back. Thank you.